was a cool October night. I was settled on my couch in my comfiest jammies, about to watch some American Dad reruns. I opened up my DVR recordings and searched for my favorite episode, Jeff and the Dank-Ass Weed Factory. I just love weed, so it's an easy favorite. Anyway, after 5 minutes of searching, I was getting disheartened. I just couldn't find it. I could have sworn I had it recorded, but it just wasn't there. I decided to just watch TBS instead, and to my surprise, it was up next on the guide. I hurried to the kitchen to get a snack and sat back down on my couch, cozy and ready for some laughs. That was the last time I didn't have a constant feeling of terror around me. The episode started normally, or so I thought. It was a tiny detail, but when Stan leapt out the door and into his black 2002 Ford Explorer, I could see something strange in the window of the Smith household. Stephen and Jeff were in a heated argument. It was only on screen for a few moments before Stan drove into the CIA sign. I thought it was just something I didn't remember, as it was a small detail only seen in a window of the intro, but the episode started differently too. Stan talked about how much he loved weed. What? I shouted into my 15-inch CRT display. Stan hates weed! It just wasn't making sense. There was no contest in this episode. It was Stan's idea to take Jeff on a tour of the weed factory. No Tommy Tokes advertisement, no CIA subplot, and no golden blunt wrap. As Stan went to get Jeff, he walked by Steve's door. Blood seeped from under the door and Stan stepped in it. All he said was, "Steve, be more careful with your science projects." As Stan stepped into Jeff and Haley's room, Jeff was wiping something off of his hands. When he tossed aside the rag he was using, it was stained red. This wasn't the episode that I knew. When Stan and Jeff arrived at the factory, they were the only ones there. I suppose that makes sense since there was no contest, but what struck me as the most odd was the fresh blood on the factory lawn and windows. I wanted to know where this episode was going, so I sat and ate my candy. After an eternity in silence, the front doors to the factory creaked open to reveal Tommy Tokes standing in a red suit instead of his classic weed green. He invited them inside and took them to the soda dispenser to get into the factory. When Tokes went to put in the code, it seemed off. Coke. Sprite, Dr. Pepper, blood? Did he just say blood? A red, thick liquid spewed from the dispenser, staining Stan's suit, but he didn't seem to mind. Tokes finished off the code and the secret entrance was revealed. Surprisingly, Tokes took the pair straight to the everlasting edible, but again, it was off. This is the neverlasting edible. You'll never get high again. But that's the whole point! Why wouldn't Tokes want people to get high? Hearing what this edible was obviously set Stan and Jeff off. Their expressions turned from chill stoner to steeped in rage. They looked at each other, and then it seemed like they looked straight at me. Should we? They said in unison. What? Should we? Before I could give another answer, they jumped on Tokes. They squished his eyes with their thumbs, then tried to rip his skull out. Tokes' face was bulging out, and he was crying in pain. Stan and Jeff both took one of his hands and bent all his fingers back until a loud crunch was heard. They started to pull Tokes' thumbs out of their sockets, and then straight off his body. Jeff pulled out a knife, covered in blood, and started to saw Tokes' legs off. He was begging for them to stop the entire time, but his cries were constantly drowned out by Jeff and Stan's laughter. When Jeff hit Bone, he dropped the knife and started twisting and tugging the leg off. Bones were crunching before the entire leg came off. I shut the episode off and threw up in the kitchen sink. When I leaned up and looked for the paper towels, I noticed the knife was missing from its block. I chalked it up to misplacing it and went to my room to try and get some sleep. After hours of tossing and not being able to get the laughing out of my head, I finally fell asleep, partly due to exhaustion. I woke up still remembering what I saw last night. My knife was in the kitchen sink, with a strange red tint on some parts of the blade. I hadn't seen it when I was throwing up last night, but I was also in a state of fear and disgust. I logged onto Twitter to see if anyone else would have known what I had seen, but I froze when I saw a tweet from NBC News. Snoop Dogg murdered in California home. Snoop Dogg's body was found earlier today, mutilated in his own home. His eyes were gouged out, his hands were badly broken, and he was missing a leg. Officers and detectives on the scene couldn't find the murder weapon anywhere, but during their searching they did find one piece of evidence. One tan bucket hat.